Hey, good morning. My name is John McSheffrey. I'm the president of Engage, and I want to thank you all for joining me this morning. I also want to thank the team at Innovonics for having me be part of this exciting event, but also thank them for being our partner for the last 10 years and working closely together. I'm looking forward to showing you about Engage over the next 25 minutes and answering any questions you might have towards the end. So let's take a look. Before I get going, I want to share a little story pertaining to a client that we have that has our technologies installed in their facilities across the United States. They're a Fortune 10 company, and one of the facility directors and I were speaking, and he was telling me about the difficulties he and his team were having keeping their building up and going because they were unable to get into it. However, he mentioned that one area that he did not have problems with was maintaining the continual code compliance with their fire extinguishers because their fire extinguishers were being electronically monitored using the Engage technology on an Innovonics backbone. That flies in the face of another story that my wife experienced about 2 weeks ago. She's been working remotely from home since March, hadn't been back in the office, but needed some information. So she got permission to go back into the office and work there for a day. She said that she was one of only two people on the entire floor as she was working. And then halfway through the day, she actually heard some noise coming from behind her. And she looked and she saw a woman coming around watering the flowers. She said normally she would never think of that as an issue or that as an instance. But when she saw that woman, she gave pause and said, whoa, who is she? What is her background? Has she been exposed? Am I being exposed? And the thoughts that my wife were having and the thoughts and problems that the gentleman from this corporation was going through are issues that every occupancy in the United States are facing on a day-to-day basis today. How do we minimize the threat of bioexposure so we can get our employees and our team back into the office feeling comfortable in work environment without fear? It's imperative to remove risk, but not reduce safety. Every facility in the United States has fire extinguishers in them per code. And per code, those fire extinguishers must be inspected and documented on a 30-day basis. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of the process that goes with the manual inspection of fire extinguishers on a monthly basis, but it requires someone to walk the entire facility each month, stopping at every individual fire extinguisher and inspecting it to make sure that it's accurate on pressure, that it's in the proper location, in the proper position in the proper location, and its accessibility per ADA is not blocked. Each extinguisher then must be marked that it's been inspected. You've seen it, the little tag on the back of the extinguisher. It takes about 5 to 7 minutes per unit. And that process requires that employee to walk entire area throughout your entire facility in and around people. Or you can do it electronically. Physical inspections are eliminated. You reduce unnecessary risk of bioexposure by using proven, recognized, and logical technology. So eliminate the need for people walking through your facilities, eliminating the need of potential exposure for your team, and stay code compliant 24/7. CBRE, Global Workplace Solutions, is one of the large property management facilities that companies that we work with. And they stated one time that if a business wants to be a smart building, they should start with lighting and the fire extinguishers. If they're not monitoring the lighting and the fire extinguishers, then it's not a smart building. And take a look at your life safety program right now. Your fire extinguishers are, your sprinklers are electronically monitored, your smoke detectors are electronically monitored, your hood systems, which are really giant fire extinguishers attached to an automatic distribution activation switch. Your manual pull stations are all electronically monitored, but why not your fire extinguisher? And the common sense step is monitoring your fire extinguishers in a manner that you don't have to do it on a physical basis. So again, let me say thank you for joining us today. We're Engage. We are located about 10 miles south of Boston, and we are a safety-focused technology company that evolved from the company that manufactures the pressure gauge on the fire extinguishers you have in your facilities. We manufacture the pressure gauges that hospitals have on their oxygen bottles. In fact, every single facility in the United States has been trusting our technology for the last 4 decades, but they've been trusting it in a passive manner. And so we've gone and forth and taken this technology and said, how do we take passive information and make it active? Well, we do it by incorporating intelligence into the pressure gauge, as you'll see in a few seconds. And by using the Inovonics wireless backbone, we communicate back to a head end. So we take that information from the wall, from the different locations, and bring it to you on your computer or to a panel. So companies like Avangrid Renewables, Suffolk County House of Corrections, the VA hospitals, Duke Medical Centers, and Comcast and others are all working with us using the Inovonics backbone to make their facilities safer. A fire extinguisher in the United States is used every 3 minutes, according to NFPA. In fact, 85% of the time a fire extinguisher is used, they're effective. Now, by effective, what I mean is putting out the fire, containing the fire, or actually buying a few minutes for that person to be able to get out of the building safely. But a fire extinguisher is only effective if it's working and accessible when needed. But that is not always the case, unfortunately. According to the National Association of Fire Equipment Distributors, about 25% of the time the fire extinguishers are inspected annually, they're not in the proper location or they're inoperable due to low pressure. As we've seen all throughout our own facilities, fire extinguishers are missing, they're blocked, they're empty, they're uninspected, those tags have no signatures on them, they are behind the potted plant, they're holding the door open, and all of those actions means that fire extinguisher is non-compliant. In fact, the number one non-compliance item the Joint Commission cited with hospitals in 2017 was the management of fire extinguishing systems and fire extinguishers. And the reason why that's so important is because when a fire happens, a person is making a decision. Do I go for the fire extinguisher or do I go for safety? When they're electronically monitored and they go for the fire extinguisher and remove that fire extinguisher from the wall, they're actually doing both. So the Engage advantage, as we've just found out, is that you have, instead of hundreds of points of risk throughout the building, you now have all your fire extinguishers on a single backbone. You reduce exposure, you improve life safety, you provide continual compliance, and through the process, you're able to reallocate labor. So if you're looking at the technology and you're saying, hey, monitored fire extinguishers may make sense for our facility, but we might be too small. Let's take a look. Dr. Smith's dentist's office with 2 to 3 fire extinguishers, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put electronically monitored fire extinguishers in there. But if you have an occupancy with large square footage, security and liability concerns, automating the process of the physical inspection on a continual basis makes smart life safety sense. So whether you're government facilities, airports, the energy facilities, healthcare, hospitals, right now, senior living, residential occupancies is a very large concern. Educational facilities. Right now, I'm sure many, many people are looking at their own families saying, how are we getting our children back into school? Are our children safe where they are? Are they safe at the universities where they're going to school? How do we minimize their exposure? How do we minimize the exposure within the corporate office that my wife had experienced? Manufacturing, high-tech, pharmaceutical, warehouse are all examples where the technology to electronically monitor fire extinguishers makes sense. Luigi's Pizza Shop, 2 to 3 fire extinguishers. Doesn't make a lot of sense. However, say Luigi owned 32 pizza shops all over an area and he wanted to tie them all back into one central head end, that would make sense. So let's take a look at the technology. As I mentioned, our facility is located about 10 miles south of Boston, and located between us and Boston is the headquarters of NFPA. So when we decided to want to incorporate technology to take the passive pressure information from the fire extinguisher and make it an active part of the life safety program, we went over to NFPA and we looked for guidance, and they gave us the guidance. They said, if you could have a technology that would continually monitor for pressure, it would make smart life safety sense. And that's easy. So we're a pressure gauge manufacturer. So we have a pressure gauge that is electronically enabled as well as mechanically enabled. The next thing they talked about was being able to manage that fire extinguisher, making sure it was in proper location, in the proper position, facing forward on a continual basis. So we did that. We have a tether on the back of the gauge that ensures that that gauge is facing, that fire extinguisher is facing forward and in its proper location. And finally, NFPA said to us, we have to make sure that that fire extinguisher is continually accessible. And we said, well, why? They said, because of the ADA, you have to have accessibility to life safety opportunities, whether it's an egress, whether it's the emergency panel, or even an eye wash station or a defibrillator. You can't have accessibility blocked. So we designed the technology to signal the moment the fire extinguisher is removed, signal when the pressure gauge falls out of a pressure range, signal when the fire extinguisher is continually blocked, and we will not allow a non-compliant fire extinguisher back into service. I like to joke that UL is a very profitable nonprofit. The technology is fully UL listed, both on the gauge ability as well as electronic ability, and it's recognized to eliminate the 30-day physical inspection. So it's logical, it's listed, it's code recognized, and it's proven. The technology can be hardwired installed or wirelessly installed. The first wireless backbone that we ever installed within Avonix was at the Suffolk County House of Corrections in Boston. I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever done a prison install, but we have, and we have you covered for it if you haven't done it already. We walked through the prison. We came back to them and we told them they had 84 fire extinguishers. They told us, no, we have 105 fire extinguishers. And we said, no, we have 84. But we walked back through again and came back and we said, you had 84 fire extinguishers. To which they came out and they showed us the documentation that they had 105 fire extinguishers being inspected on an annual basis. They didn't have 105 fire extinguishers. The technology electronically monitored fire extinguishers is going to ensure that 100% of your inventory is inspected 100% of the time. It has the ability to tie into your existing fire alarm panels, your existing building automation panels, or standalone. So when we went into the Suffolk County House of Corrections, obviously we couldn't run wires. So we looked at wireless partners, and one of the wireless partners that we ended up partnering with and have been partnering with now for the last 10 plus years has been Avonix. We use their 900 megahertz frequency to go from one end of the building to the other end of the building. And we have a multitude of choices of head ends that we can tie into, providing real-time alerts, graphic displays, per device information, and the ability to monitor other items. We like to say we have the ability to create a Christmas tree built on the base of electronically monitored fire extinguishers and then figuring out what other ornaments you want to hang on that tree. The reverse can be said. Perhaps you have an Avonix backbone already installed in your facility and you're monitoring a multitude of items, then our technology becomes an ornament on that Christmas tree. But we are working with hospitals and we're working with educational facilities to monitor a whole host of other items. For instance, the blockage of electrical panels, temperature sensing devices, that the removal of defibrillators. In fact, one hospital asked us, they said, could you manage the removal and monitor the removal of our evacuation chairs? And I looked at them, I said, sure, I think. I'm not even sure what an evacuation chair is, but sure enough, we actually can. We have a collar that goes around an evacuation chair. And now one of the hospitals down in South Carolina, if someone removes that evacuation chair, it goes through the Avonix backbone to the head end, and they know immediately that there's a problem. Our technology is designed to be compatible with FA, BAS, EMS, IoT platforms. So whether you're working with Status Solutions or you're working with Paycom, or you're tying into a Siemens system or Johnson Control Systems or a Valcom system or Honeywell system, our technology working with the Avonix backbone has the ability to be compatible and provide continual life safety for end users. So you're looking at it and saying, why or where is the value of electronically monitored fire extinguishers? Had you asked me that question about 4 months ago, my immediate answer would be 24/7 accountability is simply better than once every 30 days. Immediate notification, knowing the moment there is an issue, and having hard data is simply better than having to go around from extinguisher to extinguisher to extinguisher. I would have talked about continual accountability, knowing that probably in the course of this conversation, a couple of you have probably looked at your cell phones, looked at your emails. That's because you have to. Real-time data is no longer a nice to have, it's a must have. You want to reduce exposure. You want to reduce your exposure to liability, your exposure to business interruptions, and if you're in the educational facilities, tampering and vandalism. And in the process of putting in continual accountability, you get an ability to redeploy your resources and minimize risk. I'll tell you a story about a hospital that was down in the Carolinas that had our technology installed in one of their facilities. The Joint Commission came in and said, I'd like to see your fire extinguisher inspection reports. And the hospital said, well, we don't do them anymore for this building. They're electronically monitored. And at the time, the inspector had not seen our technology. And they looked over and they saw the Joint Commission acceptance, and they walked through what the technology could do pertaining to the pressure and the position and the accessibility. And when they were done, the Joint Commission inspector said, do you realize you've gone from 100 points of risk down to 0? And that's what end users are doing all across the country. Now, if you had asked me that 3 months ago, I would have said these are the key issues. But today, from engineering firms to integrators to end users and to even citizens calling up on their own, the number one issue that we see today is minimizing the bioexposure, removing the risk of unnecessarily transmitting infectious contaminants to make buildings safer and compliant during this age of COVID. So let's talk about a case study that we have within Avonix and one of our end users. And that end user happens to be the VA Medical Center in Detroit, Michigan. Prior to installing the technology, they had fire extinguishers throughout the entire buildings, 5 buildings in fact, and they were not inspected per Joint Commission and NFPA standards on a monthly basis. Missing and unaccounted fire extinguishers were the norm, and not necessarily because they were having people slacking off doing the job. You just had a difficulty time managing the time, the cost, and the effort to ensure that you had those extinguishers properly inspected. And thus you had exposure to hundreds of individual points of risk. Well, one of those individuals was retiring. The VA Medical Center was looking to find a better way, a smarter way to do the technology, and they found us. We started working with them on a smaller scale, 1 building at a time, and proved the technology out. And they started realizing that they had immediate notification if something happened. Today, they have 100% full compliance throughout their facility, 24/7 accountability. Their monthly inspection of labor has been eliminated, and they have a single system for all of their extinguishers. And they had a fire. They had a car fire in their parking garage last January. Now, there are no smoke detectors and there are no pull stations inside parking garages, but there were electronically monitored fire extinguishers. It was the end of the 3rd shift, right before everybody was to arrive. The doctors were arrived, the nurses and administration were arrived. Patients were coming in for the daily, their meetings, and they had a car fire, and this was the main garage. But because that fire extinguisher was electronically monitored and it sent a signal to the main head end, and they were able to get fire apparatus there immediately, they minimized that car fire to 1 car. And they were able to keep that parking garage going despite that fire, and keep the flow of business going. So that unto itself is a huge reason to have fire extinguishers working, accessible, and available when needed. The VA hospital in Detroit, Michigan says that the return on investment has been a little over 3 years, and that's based on a labor rate. But really, the return on investment was that 1 fire, and they kept the doors open and they minimized the exposure of their brand, of their patient safety, and of the safety of the people inside that building. So virtually everything today inside a building pertaining to safety and operations is automated today. Why not the fire extinguisher? Monitoring fire extinguishers just makes life safety sense. It provides 24/7 compliance. It streamlines your operations. And in the process, it's reducing the risk of exposure for your employees, easing their fears in this age of COVID. So I thank you for your time on this. I thank Avonix, and I will be popping up to answer any questions that you guys might have. But thanks for listening.